The British Empire held India with the barrel of a gun, but military force is expensive to maintain. To keep millions of people subjugated long-term, you lock them into an inescapable economy. You control what they grow, and you control who they sell it to. This diagram shows exactly how that control worked on the ground in the rural district of Champaran. British landlords divided vast estates and leased them to Indian tenants under a strict sharecropping arrangement, meaning the farmers worked the land but paid their rent in crops. The landlords mandated that 15% of every plot had to be planted with indigo, a highly profitable plant used for dark blue dye. The farmers then had to hand over the entire harvest to the landlords as rent. That system worked perfectly for the British, right up until German chemists learned how to make synthetic indigo in a lab. Factory-made dye flooded the market, making the natural indigo growing in the fields of Champaran completely financially worthless. The British landlords knew the indigo contracts were dead, but they kept the German discovery a secret from their tenants. Instead, they approached the farmers and offered a deal. They would generously release the peasants from the 15% obligation, provided the farmers paid them a heavy cash compensation. The peasants willingly signed the new agreements to escape the burdensome indigo crop. They handed over their meager savings to buy their way out of a contract that already had zero value. The entire scheme was a perfectly engineered, fully legal trap designed to squeeze the last remaining drops of wealth from illiterate farmers. That system produced men like Rajkumar Shukla. He was poor, emaciated, and physically worn down by a lifetime of hard labor on land he would never own. When the farmers finally learned the truth about the synthetic dye, Shukla decided he wanted his money back. In 1916, Shukla traveled to a political convention and found an obscure lawyer who had recently returned from South Africa, Mahatma Gandhi. Shukla shadowed Gandhi across India for months, begging him to visit his district. Eventually, Gandhi agreed to board a train to Bihar. When Gandhi arrived to investigate, he found a completely paralyzed society. The peasants were terrified of the landowners. Meanwhile, the local Indian lawyers were taking the farmers' cases to court, losing consistently, and charging the impoverished sharecroppers exorbitant legal fees for the privilege. Gandhi assessed the situation and immediately ordered the lawyers to stop going to court. Taking these cases to a British judge achieved nothing. The farming contracts and the extortion were secondary issues. The real disease crippling the peasants was fear. Gandhi bypassed the courtroom entirely. He and his team spread out across the district and began a massive grassroots investigation. They sat with the farmers and manually wrote down over 10,000 sworn witness statements, compiling an overwhelming mountain of evidence against the landlords. The British authorities recognized the threat of thousands of peasants organizing their stories. The local police superintendent intercepted Gandhi on the road and handed him an official legal notice. The order was simple: quit Champaran immediately. Gandhi signed the notice to acknowledge receipt. Right next to his signature, he wrote a short note explicitly stating that he would disobey the order. This deliberate refusal to follow a government command, civil disobedience, forced the British to formally summon him to trial the next day. In front of the magistrate, Gandhi did not hire a defense team or try to find a legal loophole. He stood up, pleaded guilty to breaking the law, and offered to pay the penalty. He told the court he faced a conflict of duties, and he chose to disregard the eviction order to obey a higher law of our being, the voice of conscience. The magistrate was paralyzed. By accepting the punishment so willingly, Gandhi removed the court's leverage. The judge refused to issue a sentence and released him without bail. Gandhi used their own rigid bureaucratic framework to expose the fragility of British authority in real time. While Gandhi was inside the courthouse, something massive happened outside. The volume of people inverted the power dynamic. The British officials and their police forces were completely overwhelmed by the crowd. They actually had to ask Gandhi to step in and help them regulate the masses. This sent a shockwave through the Indian elite. Prominent lawyers like Rajendra Prasad had originally planned to simply go home if Gandhi was arrested. Seeing an outsider willing to go to jail for total strangers shamed them into action. They returned to Gandhi and agreed to court arrest alongside him. The government eventually dropped the case against Gandhi and formed an official inquiry. Faced with the crushing weight of those 10,000 peasant depositions, the British landlords had to admit fault. Gandhi demanded they refund 50% of the extorted money to the farmers. The landlords refused. They countered with an offer to refund a mere 25%. They assumed Gandhi would reject such a lowball figure indignantly, which would stall the negotiations and drag the conflict out for years. Gandhi immediately accepted the 25%. The deadlock ended instantly. On paper, settling for a quarter of the stolen money looks like a compromise, but Gandhi understood that the actual financial math of the refund was irrelevant. For decades, the British planters operated entirely above the law, behaving as untouchable lords over their estates. By forcing them to legally surrender their money, Gandhi forced them to surrender their prestige. The peasants watched the people who had oppressed them for generations publicly bow to an inquiry. The farmers realized they had rights, and they had people willing to defend those rights. The systemic fear that kept them docile simply evaporated. Within a few years, the British planters abandoned their estates entirely, and the land reverted back to the farmers. Once the psychological dominance of the oppressor is broken, the physical occupation cannot survive. But Gandhi knew a political win was hollow if the population remained sick, illiterate, and disorganized. He refused to leave Champaran. He called in volunteers from across India. He brought in doctors to work for free. He sent for his own wife, Kasturba, and his youngest son to open primary schools in 6 different villages. They taught basic sanitation, dug new latrines, and distributed medicine to combat malaria and skin infections. During this time, an English pacifist named Charles Freer Andrews visited Champaran to say goodbye before taking a post in Fiji. Gandhi's lawyer friends desperately wanted Andrews to stay. They reasoned that having a sympathetic Englishman on their side would make their legal and political battles much easier. Gandhi furiously rejected the idea. He told his friends that looking for an English prop to fight an English system proved they were weak in their own hearts. Their cause was just, and they had to rely entirely on themselves to win it. The Champaran movement started over a dispute about indigo dye. But by curing the peasants of their fear, uniting the local leaders, and demanding absolute self-reliance, Gandhi forged the exact strategy that would eventually bring down the entire British Empire.